why, really. And I was a big script collector and source for the store. Me and 3 other guys were probably the kings of the script underground. We're going to get them and bring them to the store. We don't know why. I didn't even do it for money. I just wanted more scripts to fill up my storage unit. And I pretty much said, can I work here? Like, help you clean up the place? Because it was a mess. And I don't want money. I just want credit, because that's where I was. And I started working there, and eventually it became like a real job because, it eventually does with Eric. So stand behind the register, and then I drifted into doing all the other things with him, and like everyone, all the stories have a similar thing. If you meet Eric and you meet the whole world, I would constantly meet people who I hadn't seen in 10 years or never heard of before, who had known him forever, and would say, "Oh, these stories we've known for 50 years." That just kept happening. It's probably still going to happen for many years to come. I ended up working in the store for 10 years, then I started doing conventions with him, vending and booking actors into things, and I'll just do 3 anecdotes because I'm rambling hard here, and I'll just save it for a blog post to make more sense. But first one, Eric and business. I'm sitting at the front desk of the last incarnation of the store, and I'm trying to convince Eric of something that we need to be doing. I don't know. And he's standing there like nodding, "Yeah, we should do that." He'll say, "Yeah, we should do that. It's great. Yeah, we should do that." And I was like, "Okay, what you need to do," and then suddenly he looks to the side and goes, "Oh look, my favorite dog!" And he ran out of the store. Like the conversation wasn't even happening. And I'm like, well, okay then. We don't know what dog it was. We don't know anything else. But that was pretty good. Another one is celebrity related. We were at San Diego Comic-Con. I'm sitting at the table and I'm half paying attention. Eric would always invite people to Mexican wrestling. He always wanted to go down Friday night at San Diego Comic-Con to the whateverville in Tijuana, which terrified everybody but Eric. Anyway, and he dragged like a wild assortment of people who would say yes, and he was just telling this one person, "We should come down, it's great, we're gonna go wrestling and the thing, it's amazing," and like this really attractive woman, and I know right away what Eric does not know, which is that it's Daryl Hannah. And he basically goes on and pitches Daryl Hannah a night in Tijuana, and yeah, that'd be great, you gotta go, and she was very kind, "No, I'm busy, and I can't," and went away, and I was just like, "Eric, you never mind." There was one other one. I have to remember my notes, but I guess they're gone. Okay. I dressed Eric's style tonight with a wacky tie and a somewhat wrinkled shirt, though I guess it would have been more accurate if it was kind of a blue plaid, but we can't win them all. The last bit of anecdote I had, what was it here? Oh yes. One thing that Eric did, which I'll just pay tribute for here as my final thing, was that for years, for reasons unknown, he thought it was a good idea to disrupt the panel of Paul Salmons, and we did a Blade Runner panel every year in San Diego, and talk about Blade Runner and the history of Blade Runner and everything he worked on, and he would give this panel, like, it's a real San Diego Comic-Con panel, but for some reason Eric wanted to disrupt it and stand up and say, "Blade Runner's the worst piece of crap ever," and Paul was in on it, and he would just play along, but the people running the show were aghast, and they never knew. It went on for years. So anyway, and of course, like I said, I'll leave before the rambling starts. I'll just finish by saying I can't imagine what my life would be like. I met my wife because I was working with Eric. It goes on and on and on. The fantastic adventures and all the people I've met, and all the things I've done, all the movies I've seen, none of them without him and the crew, my family at the store. So here's to Eric. I will have your ghost at the few remaining tables. Will be, he also once, when I had a kid at the show, he put a sign on him saying "for sale for cannibalism." Anyway, thanks guys. All right, love you, man. Jamie, is Jamie still here? Jamie, come on. Good chance. Jamie's somebody who also worked in the store for some time with Eric, and Jamie, I think you were also on that bill for the Jack Baker benefit.
I wrestled this man at Mogul, thanks to Eric. He defeated me, but we won't go into that right now.
It was new wrestling, by the way, he left that out.
Oh, we won't go.
Classic issues of the Hollywood Book and Poster News, for those who remember it, an old newsletter fans in there just to put out for the store too.
Boy, I'm freaking out. I was in a band when I was a teenager. I grew up in Santa Maria, California. I was in a band called Los Cremators, a horror band. We used to drive up to see punk rock gigs and gothic gigs before it was goth. It was death rock back then. And there used to be this crazy guy with a gut and a shirt tail sticking out, these dark glasses that would be, you know, kind of doing this kind of thing. Sometimes he'd be wearing a leather face mask. See a bunch of punk rockers and this guy in a leather face mask with a toy chainsaw in the middle of the slam pit. It was something he never really could get over. And then, so me and my friends, we'd come up from Santa Maria, we'd go to the gigs, we'd spend the night at my brother's house. The next day, before we go home, we'd stop off at this crazy little shop called Hollywood Book and Poster, the Las Palmas location. The best fucking store ever. So there was, the store was all black, and I remember like we used to be big fans of Ed Wood films back in Santa Maria. We used to take acid and time it to a peak right at like around 1 o'clock in the morning when KHJ or KCOP would show Plan 9 from Outer Space, you know. So we were also big fans of Blood Feast. This is when video cassettes were first coming out. Santa Maria never had any kind of cult cinema stuff. They would see Dawn of the Dead, Midnight Show, that would be about it. So video was coming out. We were seeing Blood Feast, all these great films. You'd see, you know, Jimmy Maslin and Eric J. Caiden present. So I remember going, one day we were in Hollywood Book and Poster, we're goofing off, we're buying our magazines, we're buying our t-shirts, because we couldn't get any of that kind of stuff in Santa Maria, and this guy behind the counter, the same guy that I saw in the slam pit, handed me a business card. Eric J. Caiden, proprietor. And I'm like, oh, are you the same guy that owns or that works with the Herschel? Yeah, Herschel's a great guy, great guy. So, you know, I was starstruck, and then years later, the Los Cremators were supposed to move to Hollywood and be a band. I was the only one that ended up making it. I'd just go to Hollywood Book and Poster every day because I didn't have nothing else to do. John will remember this. I was such a pesky fucking little kid. They used to give me like movie passes just to get rid of me. So thanks to Hollywood Book and Poster, I got to see a bunch of free screenings even back before I was an employee, you know. And then so, as everybody, I have a story to tell. My first day Hollywood working for Eric was not at all planned. I was just hanging around one day. Hey, what are you doing later? Nothing. Why? What's happening? No, just come by around 10. You want to help me out with some stuff? Yeah, sure, I'll help you out. So go back to the store. 10 o'clock? What? Go back to the store. A bunch of Mexican guys started loading in. I think they were either retiling the store or recarpeting a little bit. Yeah. And then so I'm there. I was like, oh, I guess we're going to help these guys, Eric, right? He's like, no, you're going to sit here and watch these guys. There's this Jean-Claude Van Damme movie playing down the street. I got to go see it. I fucking hate that guy. So, you know, you just keep an eye on things while I'm gone, all right? And I was like, okay, you know. So I got paid $5 an hour to make sure these Mexican guys did a good job, and you know, read magazines. $5 an hour turned out to later on not be cash, but store credits. And then after that, you know, it became one thing led to another. Next thing you know, I worked on and off for like, what, 10, 15 years. John, one of my best friends, got to meet Tom Ranoni, working for Eric, also like Lisa, Ken, man. And then Eric, I later joined a band called Chemical People. Of course, Eric came along for the ride. If you ever saw us at the Coconut Teaser, that same guy wearing the leather face mask and the little toy chainsaw was up on stage with us for a lot of the gigs. I was gonna do a serious kind of tribute to Eric, but now everybody's kind of, you can't make fun of the guy because you loved him so much. But now, of course, I can't even remember what I was going to say, but it's because, you know why, John? I can't. I can't. I can't. If you guys knew Eric, that was one of his catchphrases. Anyway, one thing I did want to say is, it's sad that he's gone. One thing I fucking miss more than anything is the clubhouse. I told John just the other day, God damn it, man, just my new doctor's right down Hollywood Boulevard. Used to ride my bike from my doctor visit, stop by the store, you know, the store. Never called it Hollywood Book and Poster, it was called the store. Called the store. You know, where's Eric? You know, called the store. And just anything, that number is going to be in my brain forever. You know, 465-8764. Anything, just called store. There's a Ramones playing tonight, called store. Danzig's playing tonight, called store. The Three Stooges marathon, called store. You know, it just freaks me out that it just you can't go there, you can't go. You know, it's terrible. But Eric was a guy that never slept. He slept maybe, except for at the movies. I used to work, did a lot of, over the years I did a lot of conventions with Eric. Okay, here's what, Eric was so cheap when his cassette player broke down in the van that we used to drive to conventions. Instead of getting it fixed, he went to Radio Shack and bought a little $10 like portable one with a handle, you know? And thank goodness for that, because then during the conventions we'd actually played at the table, we were bored out of our skulls, you know, so the Nuggets collection, all that, played a lot. I can't keep my thoughts in place of so many whirling memories over the years. But Eric was a guy that never slept. I did a lot of conventions with him. We'd be out, you know, when you do conventions, there's always parties, especially the old days of San Diego. Fantagraphics is having a party, okay, we go, you know, stay up till like 2 in the morning, get back to the hotel room, and break out the rollaway bed. Eric, of course, was the boss, he had the big bed. You know, we'd go to sleep, I'd smoke a bunch of weed, pass out. As soon as the most minuscule particle of light would inch over the horizon, Eric's eyes would just like blink, open. Put on those glasses. 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, whatever time the sun came up, bam, start making noise, waking me up. You know, he lived every day doing what he wanted to do, which was being the job of being Eric. That was a job, man. You know, doing his conventions, running the store, flying out to fucking New York to see, like, you know, 2 members of the Seeds do a reunion show. He did all that. That was 24 fucking hours a day, man. The guy, I'm a guy that loves to smoke weed and drink beer. I like to go to my job, and then like you look forward to those days off. Eric never took a day off, man. Never a day off, just to like stay in bed and do nothing, just watch TV. It was always up first thing in the morning, go and do his business, go to the store, go have breakfast, go to the post office. You know, as soon as the store was closed, go to the movies, go to a couple screenings to go see a band play, and then it'd be out of town, out of town, out of town. I wrote this on Facebook. When the Grim Reaper came down and is about to swing the Sith at Eric, I'm surprised Eric just didn't hold up his hand and go, no, I can't. You don't understand. I gotta go to Denver next week. After that, I got Lucha Libre in San Diego. I gotta go to Tijuana and buy some masks. And then after that, you know, blah, 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 blah. That was Eric, man. So Eric, you know, up there, you're driving everybody crazy right now in heaven. Just going, no, you don't understand. Like, I got Elvis over here. I got Johnny Ramone over here. You know, I got John Wayne over here. I got all the stuff I gotta take care of. I gotta get some signatures. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you, man. Eric, fuck the man.
As a follow-up to that, anybody who knew Eric he always had outlandish, unrealistic plans. You know, he would talk to him and like, what are you doing tonight, Eric? 7:30 I have to go to the Egyptian to see this movie, and then at 9 o'clock I got to be in the City of Industry, this Lucha wrestling show, and then at 10 o'clock I'm going to see the remaining 2 members of the Seeds in some other place. And you think, how are we going to get to all these things, you know, an hour apart? You know, these outlandish plans, but if there was something he liked going on, he would try to get to all of them. And you know, I don't know, you know, Eric never did take a day off, but I think his whole life was in a way a day off because he was constantly busy, but he was constantly busy doing things he loved. And just having some of these people up who all worked for Eric and talking about how a lot of us got roped into working for Eric the moment we met him. How many people here have worked for Eric even just for like 20 minutes watching his table? I mean, that's a lot of people here at some point worked for Eric. It's amazing. You meet Eric, you work for him, and then you've got a friend for life. It's just the way it works. I'd like to bring up next Eric's cousin, Rob Minkoff.
First of all, I think we should thank Dennis for doing an amazing job. So I didn't work for Eric, and I can't say exactly that we were friends, but we were cousins. And you know, I met Eric when I was really little. We would come, my whole family would get in the station wagon and we would drive from Northern California. I grew up in Palo Alto. We would drive to LA and we would go stay with my grandparents' house. And I do remember the day that my mom came in and said, we're going to go meet the Caidens. And I was like, who are they? They're your cousins. Fantastic. So we all got in the car and we drove to Roxbury Drive. I don't know if any of you, I know some of you I mentioned having been to that house, but they had this amazing, beautiful old Spanish house right on Roxbury Drive, just south of Sunset Boulevard. And I went into the house and it just was a wonderland. It was amazing. It was a piece of Hollywood history. And it was filled, over the years, filled with more and more movie posters. But I remember when I first met Eric, he came in the room and his mom, Frances, said, I'd like you to meet somebody. And he stopped and he said, yeah. And he says, this is your cousin. And he went, oh, hey. Which is pretty much what Eric said whenever he saw me. I said, hey, Eric. Oh, hey. And, you know, when he started the store, I remember it was my mom who came to me and she said, your cousin is opening a bookstore. And I said, a bookstore? He doesn't seem to type. But then I found out that it wasn't really a bookstore, it was a movie store. A movie store, a memory store, a fantasy store. A store that was filled with all the kinds of things that I loved because I was one of those kids that grew up loving movies. And I remember, you know, thinking of Eric and thinking of the Cadences, they were so amazing, so special, so incredible that they were somehow part of this whole movie business, this movie world. And I eventually moved to Southern California to go to CalArts to study animation. And then I got a job at Disney. And all through my career, as I became an animator and a story artist and a character designer and worked on some of the Disney animated movies, you know, for me it was always like maybe someday I'm going to be able to join the Cadence Club and belong. And one day I remember Eric called and said, hey, you want to come over for dinner? And I said, sure. And so I went to their house on Roxbury Drive and I went in and he said, we're having a special guest. I said, great, and I got inside, and there was this older man, and he said, this is Forrest Ackerman. And I was like, oh my God, and we sat down at the table, and we had dinner, and it was just the most amazing thing to hear stories from him, you know, straight from his lips, talking about how he invented and came up with it, coined the term sci-fi. Do all of you know this story? Okay. And then he was actually the agent of L. Ron Hubbard. And talked at length about that, which was just unbelievable. And so, you know, so years went by and I, you know, did more and more. Eventually I directed a movie called The Lion King, and maybe some of you have seen it. And I was recently, I went to the San Diego Comic-Con, I think it was a couple of years ago, and I went to the Comic-Con and I saw Eric was there. I said, hey Eric. So he said, hey, stop by the table. And so I came by the table, and he said, how's it going? I said, good. He says, hey, you know, there's something I want to show you. And he goes over to a box, and he rifles through the box, and he pulls out a still from, like a lobby card from The Lion King. And he showed it to me, and I said, that's great. And he goes, yeah, what do you think? And I said, it's great. I said, do you want me to sign it? He goes, no, it's okay. So I was very fortunate that I got to see Eric a few months ago. I went to a restaurant on Ventura Boulevard called The Stand, which is a great old classic hamburger joint. And a few months before that, I'd gone into the store and told Eric, we talked about the fact, he says, yeah, you just had a baby. And it was true, I had a baby who's now 2.5. And I just added a 3-month-old to that, so I've got a whole family thing going on at home. But he said, yeah, I heard you had a baby, and he goes, yeah, I want to give you something. And so he goes in the back, he rifles through some things, and he pulls out this framed picture, and he hands it to me. And it was an original letter from Douglas Fairbanks to Thomas Ince about the opening of the movie The Pirate. And he says, I want you to have this for your son. And I said, oh my God, that is unbelievable. And I have that, and I've cherished it. But in that meeting, he said, I want to meet him. I really want to meet your son. I want to see your family. And I said, yeah, absolutely. But you know how things happen when you're in a family, and you know you expect things to happen, and somehow, you know, if you don't seize the moment or seize the opportunity, they can pass you by. But I was so fortunate that I got to see Eric, and I walked into the stand with my entire family, and I walked by and I noticed out of the corner of my eye, Eric sitting there with John, I think, and is wearing his cap, kind of pulled over low over his eyes, and I said, Eric, and he turned and looked at me, and he said, hey, Rob, how are you? He said, okay. And I said, well, I want you to meet my family. Here's my son, and I got my son and myself and Eric, and we got to take a picture of the three of us, which is a super, super great memory to have. So anyway, I just, you know, it's amazing that you're all here, and anyway, thank you all for being his friends and for letting Eric, really, I mean, just hearing some of these stories are things that I've learned about Eric that I never knew, like I didn't know he took LSD. And my mom is still alive, and I'm sure she's going to love to know that too. So anyway, without further ado, let's move on to the next one, because there's so many people that have so much to say. So thank you all so much.
And I will say too, I just met Rob today, but for many years I would hear about him, and you may downplay the fact that he didn't want the autograph on that Lion King photo, but Eric was really proud of Rob. We used to, like I said, we would go to Disney twice a year back throughout the 90s, and Disney MGM Studios have an animation section where they actually had working animators who were working on stuff. And I guess Rob had been there for a brief period, 6 months you said, working there at one point. Before we started really going down there, but every time we went down there, we'd go there and say, let me see, my cousin Rob is here, and he would always talk about how, yeah, my cousin Rob, he directs, you know, for Disney, after he did the Lion King, and he always talked really highly of you. We always stopped by that studio, just in case you were working there, we'd always pop by to see if you were back there. So I knew about you for 20-something years before we actually met today, and you know, he was always really proud of you and always talk about the work you were doing, so just know that too. Another person who has passed through working for Eric too is Matt Kennedy here. We'll get to, Matt.
Yeah, I think I also started as a not intentional employee. I think the room is filled with us. When they moved the store from Ivar to where it finally was larger, kind of shrunk. But I somehow got looped into helping them move. And I don't quite know how it happened, but I'm going to blame Jamie Pena. And I have a really vivid memory of being on a ladder that fell completely across all of the shelves that were in the middle, and I was suspended like Spider-Man on top of this ladder. And John looked up, and I think he thought I was Seth Green. We hadn't really officially met because people would just get hired and you'd just be there one day, and it's like, oh, you have to show up at 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. It's like, so you want me to get there at 10? No, 11 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And I just wound up working there like for 6 years or something, and would get looped in working the conventions with Tim and other people that would show up at the table that you wouldn't know who they were at all until they were sitting at the table. Like you'd go to the bathroom, you'd come back, and Eric would be gone, and you're like, oh hey, it's like, oh, you weren't sure if they were just going to steal photographs. And then you realize, oh, it's someone like me that got looped into doing this job. Maybe only for 10 minutes. I just wanted to get something to eat. And the three things that I think were really, really important to Eric in maintaining, not having to not do a job that he didn't want to do, were, of course, movies and collectibles, buffets, and his irrational love of radishes. And he loved radishes, and he'd eat them like a rabbit. He'd just like go through it and be gone in a second. This viscera of radish all over the place. And the glue that kept it all together, which was Indian casinos. So we talked about, you know, this plan that you would have. It's like, oh, I want to do this. We're going to do this convention down here, and then I can do this other convention 4 weeks later. And you'd look at the map and you'd be like, I bet there's 5 or 6 Indian conventions, Indian casinos in between these two locations, right? And there were. And anybody who did the road trips with Eric, and you know, Scott talked about doing the shows in 6 or 8 states, and I think I only did probably 2 or 3, but would be places where there would be shows and Eric would be there, so I'd end up working at the Hollywood Book and Poster table, when I worked with Bill Lustig at Blue Underground, I'm sure we ended up selling Blue Underground DVDs at Eric's table, someplace, wherever it was. And when I left and had my own company, I certainly did the same with Eric. And there's so many great Eric stories, and he was such a really giving and generous guy. And for a guy that didn't have a lot of money, he would spend every last cent on his friends and his employees. I don't think we ever bought a lunch ourselves. You know, maybe for 30 years for some employees. That Eric always picked up the tab for lunch, and that was a really big deal, especially for a lot of us who weren't maybe at the top of our game when we were working there. And I always really appreciated that, and I would always volunteer to drive because that meant I had a little bit of say into where we were going to eat lunch. Only a few places that he didn't like to eat at, and he had a cast iron stomach. The guy could eat absolutely anything. And
Except mushrooms.
except mushrooms. He hated mushrooms. And
No mayonnaise.
mushrooms. Like, oh no, mushrooms ruined, terrible. Can't eat it. He's eating it. But yeah, it was In-N-Out was a big favorite. But one really vivid memory I have among the many, and when you work conventions with him and you're sharing a room, there's a lot of really vivid memories that you want to get rid of. The crack of dawn wasn't always the crack of dawn. But I apologize. But Eric threw a great convention called the Cult Movies Convention, which he partnered with Michael Kopner. Before Michael Kopner kind of went crazy and tried to kill Eric. But it was an amazing convention, and everybody who went to had a blast, and it reunited the entire cast of Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, and Ross Meyer was still alive at the time. It was just this amazing, amazing collection of people, and you know, people that had known Eric for years and who had done signings at the shop in its many incarnations. But fast forward to when Michael Kopner did try to kill Eric with a screwdriver. About 2 days later, I had to drive him to an appointment, to a doctor's appointment actually. And so he couldn't drive, and so I was driving the van, and I drove him to the doctor's appointment and waited, and then he got up and came back into the car, and he's like, oh, I'm falling to pieces, man, I'm falling to pieces. I'm like, well, what's wrong? He's like, oh, I was brushing my teeth the other day, and I lost a tooth. I was like, you lost a tooth the other day while you're brushing your teeth? Like, yeah, I saved it. And so he reaches into his blue plaid shirt, and he pulls out a handkerchief that looks like 100 years old. And he's like, yeah, there it is. And he hands me the handkerchief while I'm driving, and I'm kind of like, I pull to a stoplight, and I look into it, and I'm like, Eric, that's not a tooth, that's a walnut. It is? And that is my all-time favorite presidential reaction with Eric. It was like, he was so happy it wasn't a tooth. And I was telling him, well, is there a hole back there? You know, did you feel a hole where the tooth might have been? He was like, he hadn't thought it through that far. But when it fell into the sink, he freaked out, and he was like, I need to save that, I guess, in this handkerchief. But, you know, I frequently go back and visit the store as often as I could, and sometimes I get there a little bit before closing, but there was a screening, and so the store would be closed. But and I was like, oh, they're probably down the street at the Egyptian, and maybe I can catch up with them there later. And sometimes I get a chance to hang out with the guys again later. But I saw him maybe about a month and a half, I think, before he passed away, and he was excited to be doing what he loved to do, which was have these screenings here. And the first thing I was like, oh, you're going to go to the screen next week? We've got, you know, he'd roll out who the guests were going to be and what the screenings, what the films are going to be. And he just loved it, and it was sort of, you know, tantamount to who Eric was, that he loved every aspect of everything that he did, and that brought together a huge collection of people that might not have otherwise known each other, but you'd see people and you'd know people through a certain context, and then realize that you also knew them through Eric. You know, like Howie. Like, I had met Howie completely in a different context before realizing, oh wow, oh yeah, of course you know Eric Caiden. Like, of course. And like almost every person who I love spending time with can say that. They can say, oh yeah, you know, I knew Eric Caiden. And it is difficult, you know, to think that, because I think we thought he'd always be there. Because he could eat anything, and he could take any kind of abuse. And he wrestled a bear or something, you know, at one of the crazy events that he did with Johnny Legend. And I was like, you wrestled a bear? He's like, yeah, it was a sleepy bear. Wow, you know. And, you know, I remember doing being one of the skeletons that ran out and scared people during one of the screenings of the William Castle films, or, you know, hand cranking one of the projectors when it broke during the Coffin Joe screening, when he brought Coffin Joe for the very first time to the United States from Brazil. I mean, anybody who knows who Coffin Joe is, you know that because Eric Caiden knew who Coffin Joe was. You know, and a lot of us, if we found out about Herschel Gordon Lewis, we probably found out because of Eric Caiden. We knew Russ Meyer, to a lesser extent, through Eric. And I got to meet, you know, Russ and almost work for Russ because of Eric. So, you know, it's great to see everybody here, people I haven't seen in a really, really long time, and some of you who maybe you know me from a different context and didn't realize that I worked for Hollywood Book and Poster for 6 years. You know, one of the first people I talked to after 9/11 was Eric, you know, because we had to go open the store, and saw John, you know, and Eric showed up at work with a box full of flags, you know, on that Tuesday morning. So, you know, I don't want to end it on a somber note because, you know, he died doing exactly what he loved to do, though it wasn't at a video poker machine. One of the things they did. So, you know, my hat's off to him. He was one of the people I really loved in my life, and was so glad that he was a part of it. And I would not have done what I ended up doing. You know, I went from being at that photocon with John at Hollywood Book and Poster to working for Bill Lustig, to starting the company, and now going back to the art gallery that I've worked at and run for years now. And it's all very central to following your passion, which is what Eric did. In that way, he was kind of a role model. Not a lot of other ways, but in that way, he definitely was. He was just a really sweet guy and a really giving guy. And I don't know that I've ever met anybody else who was that extent of those things as Eric Caiden. And you know, I'm sure we're gonna see some other stuff here that will, and for the rest of our lives, really, that will remind us of just how important Eric was to us individually, but really to Hollywood. You know, and to how we now respect B-movies and people who have built careers off of attending events at Hollywood Book and Poster. I mean, I bought posters from him from the back of Fangoria magazine. And I think I sold a couple of them back to him later on. And I think that the first nickel I made in Hollywood was probably selling Eric Caiden the Subway poster from Quest for Fire. That I remember getting the biggest box I'd ever received in my life. It was like a refrigerator-sized box, but it was only this thick around. Buying this poster through the mail from the back of Fangoria magazine, and then meeting him years later, and working for him years later, and just hanging out with him years later. So, you know, I think we can all say it. We all love Eric Caiden. It's okay, you can say that out loud.
We all love Eric Caiden.
And so I'm going to hand it back, and I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight.
I will say, like, Eric literally knows everybody in this town. Like he said, you know, people meet people and they realize, oh, you know Eric too? And my last girlfriend, who I dated for a few years, met a few years ago, and meeting her, totally separate, not through Eric, and talking to her and found that, oh, so she tells me that in one of Eric's wrestling shows, you know, many years ago, where he played D.T. Dunphy, or one of his oddball characters, she was the sexy nurse who brought him into the ring. And I'm like, oh, okay, so you were involved in one of his wrestling shows. Literally everybody, you know, knew Eric in some way here. And just I want to, I guess, segue from what Matt said and some of the people I mentioned, I'd like to see if Bill Lustig would like to come up and say a few words about Eric also.
Little stiff. Can you bring me the mic? You got me do it. You don't mind, do you? Sorry, a little stiff for sitting. I met Eric Caiden in 1980. I was out here from New York. It was our first public screening of Maniac. And I was out here with Joe Spinell, who was very much like Eric Caiden. He too would have looked at the ducks. And we went to Hollywood Book and Poster, Joe Spinell and myself, and Eric became our conduit to Hollywood. He set up a tour of Forey Ackerman's museum for Joe and I, which was amazing. And his enthusiasm was, his store became like a kind of a home base for me when I came out from New York. I would come to his store, and it was, it was kind of the place I always visited. And I always saw him over the years, and he was just this enthusiastic guy, just as everyone expressed, always doing something, always setting up something. He would show my movies occasionally. He did a film festival of my films at Ritz Theater, I think it was, on Hollywood Boulevard. 1992. 1992, yeah. And I had lunch with Eric the day before he died in Palm Springs, and I'm a little shaken by it. It was the day before he died, but we were making plans to come here, Tuesday Night Grindhouse, and he invited me to the wrestling, the Andy Kaufman wrestling. The lunch was at Sherman's Deli. Eric had ordered a pastrami and chopped liver combo sandwich, and proceeded while he's there, he's picking it apart, and he's asking the waitress to keep bringing him extra rye bread, and he's making little sandwiches, one big sandwich, and I'm looking at him going, oh my God, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking down at what I'm eating. I'm having a brisket, with potato pancakes, and I'm thinking like we're both killing ourselves with food at this lunch. And I was really taken aback when I heard he died the next day. But I got to tell you, the day before, I can tell you guys, he just had nothing but enthusiasm and planning things. I mean, I wish I would go that way, because he did not, he just, just had a zest for life, and for, he had like this boundless curiosity, and just a great guy, and I'm really going to miss him. I'm going to miss running into him and seeing him at all the festivals and screenings, and, just like all of you. All right, thanks.
To kind of follow a similar theme, I'd like to bring up another New York-based filmmaker who's known Eric for many years too. Is Buddy still here? Yeah. Buddy Giovanazzo? And that's the thing with a lot of people too, is Eric obviously loved all his old actors and directors and people who made films he loved, but he was always very, very supportive of new upcoming people with pride, whether it was a filmmaker, somebody would come out with a book, or a fanzine, or a band. He was always just very supportive of these things because he really loved these films and wanted to keep these kind of things going on.
He was, it's funny, I was here a year ago, almost this month, a year ago in June, right, Brian? Yeah. And Eric and Brian screened Combat Shock here, and Eric did the Q&A, and it's funny because that's how I met Eric. I met Eric actually over the phone. He called me up, I think it was 1990, and he was doing the screenings for a Fangoria convention in New York. Now at the time, I had my 60mm print. I was showing it everywhere, nightclubs, whatever. I couldn't really get any traction. So I had screened it for Fangoria, seeing maybe they'd get some reviews, maybe they'd support it in some way. They really didn't like it. They didn't feel it was a horror film. It wasn't really a drama, it fell in the cracks. So I get this call from Eric. He says, I'm doing the screenings. I saw your film, I really like it, I want to screen it. So I said, okay, the Fangoria convention. But have you talked to the Fangoria people? He says, I don't care what they say. Fuck them, I like the film. That was Eric. That was Eric. Eric loved the underdog. And that's what I loved about him. He didn't know me from anywhere, and my film hadn't been seen practically by anybody. And he just said, fuck it, I like this film, I'm going to screen it. So we screened it there. I went with my 60mm print, I meet him, he's at the booth. And as I'm screening it, I can see like there's a certain energy, and I realize the film has a shot because it affects audiences. It really disturbed the audience, and it made a horror audience look at a film that could have easily been fallen through the cracks and disappeared. So after the screening, and everybody in this room I'm sure has the same story, I thank him profusely. I say, thanks, this is really great, you know, you really helped me, it's fantastic. And he says, can you mind the booth for me for 10 minutes? I swear to God, he didn't know me, he met me that day. He met me 2 hours before. You know, I'll be right back. So I'm, you know, I'm a New Yorker, I'm not used to this, I'm not used to distrust. I'm here at the booth, and I sold like 4 t-shirts. He comes back, I said, you know, I just sold 4 t-shirts. I said, oh man, that's fantastic, that's great. So he gave me a Monster from Cadence Blancas t-shirt for free. That was my payment. It wasn't credit, but you know what, he loved films, he loved what he did. And like I said, he just supported the little guy. And you know what, the little guy needs support. You know, there's too much arrogance, there's too many bullies, you know. And I always love it about him, and you know what, no convention's ever gonna seem the same when you're looking for his booth, when you're looking for his table. We're going to really miss him. I miss him already. And I didn't know him as well as many people in this room. And just to know him, the little that I did, it's a gift. You know, he loved filmmakers, he loved film, and he loved life, he loved food, he loved everything. You know, God bless him. Right? We're going to miss him. Thanks.
So too is, you know, obviously with the clips we show and the programming Eric's done over the years, it's always focused on more kind of the horror genre, exploitation. But Eric loved all film. He loved classic films. He loved all kinds of films. And one thing I always love with Eric, when you go to various film conventions and things, you'd sometimes run into somebody who had been a big star, made a lot of big Hollywood films, and maybe later in their career at different points had made sort of, you know, the lower budgeted genre films. And a lot of times you'd meet these people for the first time. Eric didn't know this person yet. And of course, he'd always go up and tell them, oh, you're in one of my favorite movies. And they would think, oh, on the waterfront? You know, they'd name those big movies they were in. And of course, Eric loved them some small B movie they made. And of course, at first, a lot of those people thought Eric was just, you know, fucking with them. Just trying to like, you know, great. And then, but Eric would talk to them, and he would know all of their films and all of their roles, and be able to talk about the big picture they did and why he liked that smaller picture they did. And then they would realize, you know, and he'd end up becoming friends with these people who at first thought, there's just a wise ass who's going to come up to him and say, yeah, you saw me in some, you know, crappy driving movie in the 70s. But the reality was he loved all their movies and all their work, and just generally did enjoy those other things they did. And that was something I loved about Eric. He just, you know, he was enthusiastic about all of this stuff, and it was so contagious. You know, his enthusiasm was so contagious. And I want to bring up, I guess, what would continue some of the film theme here. I have to bring up also Sid Haig, somebody who Eric has mentioned many years also.
Hey, what's up? Show of hands, how many people remember that greeting? Yeah, that was his. No matter what. Hey, what's up? I've heard a lot of great stories from a lot of great people today, and I don't know how much more I can add to what's already been said, except to reiterate that Eric was a great guy, and he always tried to make you better. That was the thing that was important to me. He would always find a way to somehow promote you, to make people aware of your existence, of what you could do. I remember in this building, along with Brian, Eric came to me and said, you know what? Let's do a Sid Haig Film Festival. You know? He goes, You never knew if it was no or yeah, because it was no, yeah. And so we put together half a dozen films, and I was able to get some cast members from the films to come down and do Q&As and stuff like that. And it was great, but he didn't have to do that. You guys didn't have to do that. You're an extension of him, okay? I look at you and I see him. And that's another thing. I mean, Eric is here. He's here with us. All you gotta do is close your eyes, and he'll be there. here. And whenever really losing, I remember we were at a convention some damn where, I don't know. And he said, "There's a wrestling show tonight." I said, "Oh, okay, cool." He said, "And I'm wrestling." What the fuck are you talking about? I'm wrestling Scotty Schultz. I said, "Scotty Schultz makes me look like little me, okay? How the hell are you gonna wrestle this guy?" He said, "No, the deal is, see, I lose. I always lose. I lost to a chair. I lost to a skeleton, okay? So we have to find a way for me to lose." Okay, whatever. So we get in the ring and Scotty Schultz is pacing back and forth. He's like 7'92". And he's pacing back and forth and staring Eric down. And I'm standing there next to Eric and I said, "Well, I guess I better do something managerial." So I started massaging Eric and he passed out. That was Eric, man. That was him in a nutshell. I can remember we were in Orlando, and we were all going to go somewhere. I forget where it was, probably some buffet someplace. And when I came in the room, I said, "What a tribute." There it is, right there, the buffet table. But yeah, we were going to go somewhere, and we get out into the front, and we were staying at the Disney Pop Classic Hotel, whatever, the most gaudy place you've ever seen in your life, okay? Disney characters as tall as this room, everywhere, giant jukeboxes and bowling pins and everything. It was just absolute. In the dictionary, next to gaudy was a picture of this place. Okay? So we go out into the parking lot and he goes, "Let's see, where did I park the car?" "Eric, don't do this." He said, no, where did I park the car?" I said, "Okay, do you remember anything at all about where you parked the car?" He said, "It was under a tree." I said, "Eric, we're in a fucking forest." Okay? It took us about a half an hour. We found the tree. We went and had buffet, and there was the African Safari Hotel, a Disney attraction, and they had an African-based buffet. Okay, he ate those people out of food. Okay? The only thing left was brown meat and mushrooms. It's the only stuff left, and he was looking for more. And so I mean, you know, we had those moments together. It was great times, and I can remember standing out in front of a Hollywood and Bucket poster at one point. And I said, "You know, there's a lot of stupid people in this world. If somebody was really smart and wanted to make a lot of money, they would charge people to come in here to see famous people, okay? Because everybody who was anybody at some point in time made their way into the store, okay? And that's just the way it was, you know? That was the place to go. That was he and the store were and are Hollywood. It's just the way it is. And always giving, always understanding. I can remember I was at a convention and I was trying to find him, and I stopped this guy that was at the door and I said, "You know where Eric Caiden's table is?" And he goes, "I don't know who that is." "Okay, let me give this to you. Hawaiian shirt, baggy Levi's, baseball cap. Right over there." That was it. That was the signature. But I'm so happy to see all of you here. Happy to be here myself. Eric will always be with me, and as I am sure he will be with you. Just send him love.
And I think that's one of the hardest things too, is that all of us who are in this world of fandom, you know, Eric has been there since kind of day one. I didn't meet him until 1990 at the Chiller Show, but as other people talk about meeting him in the 70s, you know, at some of these first conventions, you know, this kind of fandom that we're all into really kicked off in, like, you know, the mid-70s or so, where these conventions started happening, and you're so used to the fact that Eric is always there. And like somebody online had mentioned too, that if you went to any convention of any sort in Southern California, no matter how dinky, crappy it was, the one constant you were sure of that Eric would have a table there somewhere. You could walk in, and somewhere you know you'd find Eric, and that was kind of the anchor. You knew, go into the convention, find Eric's table, and that was your home base. That was where you hung out there long enough. You're going to meet a lot of people. You're going to make new friends. You're going to run into Sid Haig or anyone. You never knew who was going to be there. You might spend the weekend with Tora Satana. You might. That was like home base, and he's, you know, for 40 years, Eric was always there. And I think that's the hardest thing, is to realize that, you know, that constant is something you just always assume would be there. No matter how unhealthy he may have seemed or how poor his eating habits may have been, it just seemed like Eric will keep going on forever. And that for me is hard to realize that, you know, he was such an important part of this world. And like somebody else had mentioned online, I spent the last couple weeks reading hundreds and hundreds of things that most people would post about him, about how too that, you know, he was kind of the last of the analog world. And I kind of miss the analog world. You know, I love my phone. I can look up, figure out how to get somewhere, and look up a review on Yelp and all. But you know, nowadays, sure, you can go on, you know, Amazon or movieposters.com or some other, you know, stupid website and find whatever you want and click a button and it shows up at your door 2 days later. But at the end of that 2 days, all you have is that poster, that book, that magazine, that DVD, and that's all you got for your money, is that item and nothing else. And whereas with Eric and people like him, you know, who are not really here as much anymore, you know, these kind of stores and record stores and just real unique characters. I mean, Eric was a character, a one-of-a-kind person. And if you went into Eric's store, which never really made the transition to the web, and that's because it's not really where he should be, you went into Eric's store or a place like that, and you know, chances are, if you waited long enough, I'm gonna bring up there's David Duvall here. David.
Hi, I'm David Delval, and I was with Eric the day, Sunday, which was the day he died. And it's still quite a shock to be in someone's life the last day of it. And all I can tell you is that he enjoyed every minute of that film festival. He enjoyed everything that he did. You've been hearing this for 2 hours. But I will tell you this that was odd. Eric and I never had long conversations, and I was more of I had come into Hollywood with, you know, Forrest Ackerman's address, and I went to the old house, and I kind of entered fandom that way. So when I met Eric, it was through his father, Stanley. And Stanley was a very erudite movie memorabilia collector that specialized in silent film memorabilia. And his expertise was so profound that when he died, the market for silent film posters dropped, because he was literally one of the only people that bought it outside of museums. And I knew Stanley before the first time I met Eric, or saw Eric, I think was in front of the Newark Theater, and he was dressed in a leather apron and holding a chainsaw. And Stanley said, "That's my son." And that was my introduction to Eric. But I quickly realized that he was part of that ever-growing group of lost boys that were the center of Forrest J. Ackerman's universe. Boys that loved movies, that lived and breathed movies, that never, ever, ever wanted to grow up. And so they didn't. And I see a room full of them now, and I see rooms full of them at conventions. There wasn't a convention I went to, and I went to a lot of them, that I did not see Eric Caiden. He was always there behind a counter or in front of a bunch of boxes filled with lobby cards and one-sheets. But it's just interesting that our paths intersected. I remember when I was great friends with Yvette Vickers, she decided that she was going to continue her cabaret act, which, Jesus Christ. Jan Allen Henderson isn't in the room, is he? If he isn't, I can tell the story. Because Jan Allen Henderson had a band called Nick Varoom and his something or other tune. No, yeah, okay. And he was like the kind of musician that would play the guitar and turn his back to you, so that you never could see the fact he couldn't play the guitar. And he convinced Yvette that she needed to sing this song about the attack of the giant leeches. And this is a woman who was like still doing Fever as part of her act. You know, she would kick the pillow out, you know, Fever in the morning, Fever all through the night, they give me fever. And so she takes the Leeches song and decides to give it that Patti Page look, kind of thing. So we're at the Viper Room, and I'm with Dave Stevens, who was dating Yvette at the time, and Eric was there. And we watched Yvette in a black dress with a blue light sing the following lyrics. Those giant leeches, they're crawling all over me. And then she would turn her back dramatically, and Nick Varoom would, you know, kind of do his Jimmy Page thing, whatever. He thought it was Jimmy Page, but it was more like Patti Page, actually. But in any case, Eric died laughing. He laughed so much that Dave Stevens and I had to take him outside because it was just... And poor Yvette, you know, God bless her, she was a trooper, and I loved her to pieces. But she was delusional, as so many are in Hollywood. And so she truly believed that those leeches were crawling all over her, and probably still does, wherever she might be. But in any case, the last day of Eric's life, as Clue will tell you, we went to Sherman's. And the reason we went to Sherman's was that the restaurant at the Camelot Theaters was closed because it was Sunday. So Eric joined us. Because he sat over by himself through this whole festival. He did not, you know, and it wasn't he was being standoffish or anything, it's just the way he was. And so we were at Sherman's, and it's Clue Gulliger and my friend Bill Budell and me. And for some reason, Eric decided to go down memory lane about his dad. And so we started talking about Stanley, and I've never heard Eric talk like this before, and it's extraordinary because this was his last day on this planet. He said, you know, do you remember when you and Steve Shapiro and my dad were looking for Fritz Lang's M, and he found it for like $12,000? You know, Stanley had $1 million collection of posters, and this was before it would be several $1 million now. I had $1 million worth of posters myself, but, you know, I never got those kind of prices for them. You know, I had inserts in The Bride of Frankenstein and Black Cat, but I never got the kind of money they go for at Christie's now. But in any case, Eric knew all about that kind of memorabilia. He just didn't collect it himself. In fact, oddly enough, he collected the Grindhouse stuff. You know, Johnny, the stuff that we had, because I was at that place, and he had like window cards for days from Creature from the Black Lagoon and wonderful stuff like that. But Eric knew all of that. But anyway, through the whole lunch, he talked about how much he wished he could have kept that collection, but that his mother sold it off or something, I recall. And I'll tell you something else too. He really wanted to keep the store. He said, I don't know how my credit is, it goes up and down because I'm having this and that, but I want to try and open the store in Burbank. And that last day we were together, he also said, you know, I've got a lot of prints, and I have this one movie called Beast of Morocco, Hand of Night, and I knew it well. It's a British film, rather obscure, about vampires in Morocco, and it has William Sylvester from 2001. Anyway, Eric was going to give me that print because it had turned red, and we were going to try and correct it. We were going to do this on Monday. So when I was driving back into LA, I was thinking, geez, I hope that isn't out on Blu-ray somewhere. And of course, I've done stuff with Arrow and Shout Factory and all that. I couldn't find Hand of Night. So all the way back to LA, I was thinking about what Eric and I were going to do with these movies. And he was talking about this theater, and especially about when he showed The Boy and the Pirate. I guess that was a Burt Gordon movie, and he just enjoyed that so much. And so I just remember that last day of his life, I mean, there's only two ways you can go that's really, I suppose, the best. One is to go in your sleep, or one is to just all of a sudden, you're gone. It's like an assassination. And Eric left that parking lot to go to the hotel. He was fine. And apparently when he got to the hotel, he had some stomach pains, then he had some chest pains that got so bad he called 911. The ambulance came, I think they took him to Desert Hospital, and he died of cardiac arrest in the emergency room before anything could really be done for him. So that was what I was told, and unless anyone knows differently, that's what I think happened. But Eric was an amazing guy, and he was generous, and he was kind, and that's always a disaster in Hollywood, isn't it? Because there's always people that take advantage of those that just want to give. But I will tell you, in the 30-plus years that Eric had that store, he never let it make him bitter or jaded. He just lived in an alternative universe that I wish we could all inhabit, because it seemed like a great place to live. But it was my pleasure to know him, and I'm really, he would be beyond thrilled at this. This is just amazing. So let's just honor his memory and always keep him in our hearts. Thank you.
I'd like to invite up Paul Salmon, the writer of the Blade Runner book they were talking about earlier, and the little gag they like playing at Comic-Con. And also, too, Eric was always enthusiastic. My phone is full of still messages, because wherever Eric went, he always had an idea for some show, some plan, or he met a celebrity at a show, and he'd say, hey, guess who I just met? It'd be some obscure celebrity. We should do a screening, we should call him, we should have him down and do a tribute night. He was always so enthusiastic.
Eric was enthusiastic about everything. I'm Paul Salmon. I was lucky enough to meet Eric in the early 70s, and I didn't know who he was, but this was when the Comic-Con used to be down at the El Cortez and San Diego Convention Center, and there was this wild-haired guy who always had Hawaiian shirts on, and even back then he had stuff for sale. And I was working the con at that time. I was in my early 20s. And I had just come off a gig where I was working at the Paris Pussycat downtown San Diego. And that used to be the old Horton Plaza when it had character before it became a giant sports bar like it is now. But he was thrilled to find out that I had gotten fired from the Pussycat at my midnight to dawn projectionist job because I had gone across the street to the Guild Theater, which was an old grindhouse where they had 3 movies for $1.50. And I had seen Valley of Wangi, and I'd seen Raw Meat back to back, and I'd forgotten I had to go to work, and I ran over to the Pussycat, and they already had the manager there up in the projectionist booth, and they kicked me out. They didn't even pay me my last paycheck, but he thought that was funny. That was one of the first stories we shared. A couple years later, I look at his table, and he's got a picture from War of the Worlds, and I'm about 2 years older than he is. And I said, you know, God, that movie, I saw that in 1954 when I was 4 years old. When those guys come out with that flag and they're saying, welcome to California, and that bronze cobra just spits those